The city was a shadow of what it once was. Crumbling skyscrapers loomed against the night sky, their glassless windows gaping like the empty eyes of long-dead giants. A thin mist curled through the streets below, swallowing the distant hum of passing patrol ships. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed before cutting off abruptly. Someone, somewhere, had just lost their last fight. Isria crouched on the edge of a rooftop, her breath steady despite the cold seeping through her bodysuit. She had waited 3 days for this moment, tracking his movements, memorizing his patterns. Now, finally, he stood below. Varesh a Jhakan commander, one of the most feared warriors in the occupying force. Tall, broad-shouldered, his battle-weave armor shimmered beneath the neon glow of a flickering streetlight. She had studied his kind well enough to know he was lethal. Zikans weren't just physically superior to humans. They were faster, stronger, more resilient. But they bled. That was all that mattered. Her fingers tightened around the small dart between them. A single, precise shot to the throat would end him. The toxin was human-made, designed specifically to counteract Jhakan physiology. He wouldn't even have time to draw his weapon. Her heart drummed against her ribs as she exhaled slowly and took aim. Then, in a blur too fast for her to comprehend, he moved. A hand shot up, fingers closing around the dart with terrifying precision. The poison-laced tip hovered inches from his palm, but it had failed its purpose. She had failed. Varesh turned, his amber eyes locking onto hers with eerie calm. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of that gaze, assessing, calculating. His lips curved, not in anger, but in something far more dangerous. Amusement. You dare invoke the bond of the hunter's right? His voice carried effortlessly through the night, smooth yet laced with something sharp beneath it. Panic prickled at her spine. That phrase, she had heard it before, buried in the stolen Jhakan texts the rebels had translated. Some kind of archaic law, but the details had been murky. Before she could react, he moved again, faster than thought. Isria had seen Zikans fight. She had watched them take down soldiers twice her size with a flick of the wrist. But never had she been the focus of that power. One moment he was standing below. The next, he was right in front of her. She barely had time to stumble back before his hand shot out, fingers closing around her wrist with unyielding strength. Electricity jolted through her. Not pain, but something deeper. Something primal that curled in her chest like a sleeping beast stirring. His grip wasn't crushing, but it might as well have been shackles. She couldn't break free. "It is done," he murmured, and the satisfaction in his tone sent ice through her veins. "You are mine now." The words snapped something inside her. She wrenched her arm back, twisting, kicking, desperation fueling every movement. But he was immovable, a force of nature made flesh. "Let me go," she snarled, her pulse hammering. He tilted his head, watching her struggle as if she were a puzzle he was enjoying solving. "You don't even understand what you've done, do you?" She bared her teeth. "I was trying to kill you, not invoke your ridiculous customs. And yet, by ancient law, you have done exactly that." His grip loosened slightly, but not enough to give her any real chance of escape. When a warrior catches an enemy's weapon before it draws blood, they claim dominance. The attacker is then given a choice: serve the victor or die. Her breath stilled. She had heard this before. A Jhakan tradition older than their presence on Earth. A relic of a time when their people fought among themselves. An archaic, barbaric belief that power should be rewarded with submission. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that she had unknowingly sealed her fate the moment she launched the dart. There was no negotiation, no loophole. She had declared the hunt, and he had won. "You can't possibly think I'll accept this," she spat, fury burning away her shock. Varesh smiled then, slow and deliberate. "You already have." And then he moved again. The world tilted as she was lifted off her feet, her body flung over his shoulder as if she weighed nothing. A startled cry burst from her lips as he turned, carrying her with effortless ease. "Put me down," she snarled, slamming her fists against his back. It was like striking solid stone. He didn't so much as flinch. "We have much to discuss," he said calmly, as if she weren't thrashing against him. Her mind spun, rage mixing with disbelief. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. She had spent years fighting against the Jachan rule, carving out what little resistance she could. And now she was being carried off like a prize. The rooftops blurred past as he moved with inhuman grace, leaping between buildings as though gravity meant nothing. She clenched her teeth, swallowing back nausea. If she didn't stop him before they reached his stronghold, she might never get another chance. Reaching for the small blade hidden in her sleeve, she twisted, bringing it down toward the vulnerable gap between his armor plates. Faster than she could process, his hand caught her wrist mid-strike. "Still so eager to fight," he mused, his voice carrying no anger, only something infuriatingly close to admiration. She glared daggers at him. "Kill me now or let me go. Those are your only options." He laughed, a rich, warm sound that sent heat prickling over her skin. "Stubborn," he said, as if that amused him even more. "But I told you, you are no prisoner, Isria. You are bound to me now." She stiffened. He had never spoken her name before. It slid from his lips too easily, too naturally. "I belong to no one," she growled. His hold on her wrist tightened, not painful but firm enough that she felt it. "We shall see." They reached his ship moments later, a sleek, predatory craft that loomed over the city skyline. The ramp lowered as they approached, and for the first time since this night began, fear gripped her chest like iron chains. He carried her inside. The doors sealed shut behind them, and she realized, this was only the beginning. The cell was more comfortable than she expected. That should have made her uneasy. Isria sat on the edge of a low, metallic bench, her hands resting on her thighs. The walls weren't the dull gray of a prison but a sleek obsidian black, humming softly with some unseen energy source. The air was crisp, too clean, sterile, controlled. It reminded her of the Jachan architecture spreading through Earth's cities like veins of an invading organism. Even their ships reflected the same cold precision. She wasn't bound, wasn't chained. The door wasn't even locked, at least not visibly. And yet she knew the moment she tried to leave, it would resist her, some unseen force keeping her confined. Varesh had left her here without a word after carrying her aboard his warship. She exhaled through her nose, pulse still thrumming with frustration. She should be dead. That's what happened to rebels who dared strike at Jachan commanders. She had accepted that when she took on this mission. Instead, she was sitting here, alive, untouched, caught in the grip of some ancient law she barely understood. The door slid open with a whisper. Varesh stepped inside, the heavy presence of him filling the space instantly. He wasn't wearing the full battle-weave armor now, only the dark underlayers, a fitted tunic, reinforced at the shoulders, leaving the strong lines of his throat and forearms exposed. He moved with the kind of confidence that only came from absolute control. She hated it. "You are quiet," he observed, tilting his head slightly. Not the reaction I expected. She leveled him with a glare. "What exactly did you expect? A little more fighting, perhaps." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "More cursing. Maybe another attempt on my life." Her jaw clenched. If she'd had another blade, she might have tried. But he'd already taken her weapons. Instead of answering, she shifted her gaze to the door. "Am I a prisoner?" Varesh's lips curled, almost like he found the question amusing. "No." "Then I can leave." "No." Her fingers twitched. "Sounds like a prisoner to me." His gaze sharpened, the amusement in his expression fading just slightly. "You are not in a cage, Isria. You are bound." She swallowed back the instinct to flinch at how effortlessly he spoke her name. Bound to what exactly? Some ridiculous Jachan warrior code. "To me," he said simply. The weight of those words sent something cold through her spine. She stood abruptly, ignoring the way he tracked her movement. "That's not how this works. I didn't agree to anything. You did the moment you attacked me, he countered. And the moment I caught your weapon, I claimed victory. The law is clear. Your law, she snapped. Not mine. Varesh studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing through his golden eyes. The bond of the hunter's right is not a law one can reject. It is older than our empire, older than the wars that shaped our people. He pushed off the wall, stepping closer. Do you think you are the first to resist it? She didn't step back, though every instinct screamed at her to move away. He wasn't threatening her, he didn't have to. His presence alone was enough to remind her how little control she had in this situation. You were my enemy, she said, her voice quieter than she wanted it to be. You still are. His head tilted slightly. Am I? She clenched her fists. You're part of the force that conquered my world. You sit on the side of the oppressors. You are my enemy. Varesh considered that. Then, to her complete frustration, he gave a slow nod. Perhaps. Something in her bristled at the way he said it. Like it didn't matter. Like it was just a fact, an observation, not something that could divide them the way it should. He stepped past her toward the door, and for a second, she thought he might leave. But then he turned his head slightly. Come, he said. She narrowed her eyes. Come where? You will not waste away in a cell. I claimed you. I will not let you rot here. She bit back the retort that wanted to fly off her tongue. That was the thing about this, wasn't it? He didn't see her as a prisoner. In his mind, she had already become something else. Why? She demanded. Why bother? He met her gaze, unflinching. Because the moment you stepped into the hunt, you became mine. And I do not waste what is mine. A shiver ran through her. Not from fear, but from something far more dangerous. She should refuse. She should sit here, starve if necessary, make him regret not killing her when he had the chance. But something in his voice, in the certainty of it, made her realize the truth. This wasn't just about power. He wasn't keeping her here because he had won. He was keeping her because, somehow, he had already decided she was worth keeping. And that, more than anything, unsettled her the most. Isria exhaled sharply, stepping forward. If she couldn't fight her way out, she would have to play his game, at least until she figured out how to break it. Varesh didn't smirk this time. He simply turned and led her out of the cell. For the first time since she had fired that dart, she wasn't locked away. But as the doors slid open, revealing the vast, gleaming corridors of his worship, one thing became painfully clear. She wasn't free either. The days blurred together in a haze of tension and uneasy silence. The Jhakan worship, sleek and labyrinthine, became her strange new world. The walls, smooth and cold, hummed quietly with a low, continuous pulse. Every hallway she passed through felt like a cavern of gleaming steel. Every movement, every turn, seemed designed to remind her that this was his ship, and she was his property now. At least that was how she felt at first. But as time stretched on, the edges of that reality began to fray. Varesh had not forced her into servitude, not in the traditional sense, at least. She wasn't locked in a room, wasn't shackled. He didn't demand her obedience, and when he spoke of the bond, there was no cruelty in it. Instead, there was a quiet, inevitable certainty that left her feeling both exposed and confused. She should have hated it. The whole situation. The way he moved through the ship like it was his domain. The way his presence dominated every room he entered. He never demanded anything, except for her attention. And she hated that most of all. Because the more time she spent in his company, the more it became impossible to ignore the way her body responded to him. He had seen her fight. He had seen her resist. But he also saw something more. Something in her eyes when they sparred. Something in her posture when she held a weapon. Something that piqued his interest in ways she couldn't fathom. She was his, but she wasn't passive. Not by any means. The first time she held a Jhakan blade, Varesh stood behind her, his hands resting lightly on her waist as he adjusted her grip. She could feel the heat of him even through the armor, the weight of his gaze on the curve of her neck. He didn't touch her any longer than he had to, but the proximity was enough to leave her breathless. Your stance is off, he murmured, his voice low and familiar. She stiffened, but didn't step away. She wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of showing weakness. "I know how to hold a blade," she snapped, though the tightness in her voice betrayed her. Varesh's lips quirked at the edges, his gaze narrowing. "Then prove it." With a flick of his wrist, he moved toward her, blade flashing through the air with deadly precision. It was a simple maneuver, a swift strike to her midsection, meant to test her response, nothing more. But she saw it coming, knew exactly how to counter. She twisted, stepped back, and blocked it with ease. The clash of metal rang through the chamber. But it wasn't enough. She was good, but he was better. He moved again, faster this time, pushing her back with a fluid grace that left her no room to breathe. For every step she took to defend herself, he was there with another strike, another parry, another move that forced her further into the corner of the training room. His eyes never left hers, and somewhere between their clashing blades, something ignited between them. A crackle of tension, of desire buried beneath the violence of the moment. Isria's heart hammered in her chest. He was too skilled, too dangerous, and yet, she felt a strange thrill that had nothing to do with combat. "Enough," he said suddenly, stepping back. She stood there, chest rising and falling with exertion, blade still raised in defense. But she didn't lower it. Not yet. "What's the matter?" she asked breathlessly. "Tired already?" He smirked, crossing his arms over his chest. "You are a worthy adversary, Isria. But the next time you think you can beat me, remember this. It's not enough to just fight. You need to think beyond your own instincts." "Instincts?" she scoffed. "I don't need lessons from you." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he regarded her silently, his amber eyes watching her like a hawk, calculating, waiting. "Sometimes," he said slowly, his voice quieter now, "the key to winning is knowing when not to fight." The words hit her harder than she expected. It wasn't a lesson she had anticipated, not after everything they had been through. But when she looked at him again, standing there with the quiet confidence of someone who had never lost, it was hard to ignore the shift between them. She had tried to distance herself from him, tried to push away the pull that was becoming harder and harder to deny. But the more she resisted, the more she realized something deep down. She was fighting the wrong battle. The next few days passed in a blur of strange moments. Awkward silences between training sessions, glances that lasted just a moment too long. He was never far from her, always watching, always waiting for the smallest hint of weakness. But the worst part was, she was starting to crave it. One evening, she found herself on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. She had spent hours here before, but tonight, the view seemed different. The blackness of space stretched infinitely, and yet there was something grounding about it, something strangely beautiful. She let out a slow breath, feeling the weight of it pressing down on her. "You look lost." Varesh's voice broke the silence. She didn't turn to face him, instead letting the cool air wash over her. "Just thinking." There was a quiet chuckle behind her, a sound she hadn't expected from him. "If I didn't know better, I'd say you were bored." That brought her attention back to him, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. He had moved closer without her noticing, standing only a few feet away. "I'm not bored," she said. "Just trying to make sense of all of this." "And what is all of this?" His voice was softer now, though still charged with that strange, invisible tension. She hesitated. The truth was, she didn't know how to put it into words. She didn't know how to explain the way her world had been turned upside down in the span of a few days. How she had gone from hunting him to being bound to him in some ancient, archaic ritual that felt more real than anything she had ever known. "I don't belong here," she said finally. "Where do you belong then?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. The question hung between them, unanswered. It wasn't the first time she had asked herself that very same thing. And as much as she hated to admit it, the answer was far more complicated than she was ready to face. Before she could respond, he stepped closer, his presence filling the small space between them. His scent, distantly alien, but oddly comforting, surrounded her, pulling at the edge of her resolve. "You belong here," he said, low and sure. "At least for now." Her chest tightened at the finality in his tone. She wanted to argue, to push back, but somewhere deep inside, she knew the truth. For now, she was his. The ship felt different now. Or maybe she had changed. Isria had spent days convincing herself that this him was temporary, that she was only playing along until she found a way to escape. Yet, the longer she remained, the harder it became to ignore the truth. She wasn't a prisoner. She wasn't free either. She was something else, something undefined. Varesh had stopped treating her like an enemy. He still challenged her, during training, in conversation, in the silent moments when his gaze lingered a little too long. But the distance between them had shifted, and she had let it. Tonight, the warship was quieter than usual. The hum of the engines was the only sound accompanying her as she walked through the dim corridors. Her body ached from another sparring session, but it wasn't the kind of exhaustion that dragged her down. It was the kind that reminded her she was alive. She found herself in the training hall again, fingers brushing over the hilt of a Jakan blade mounted on the wall. The balance of their weapons was different from human ones, sleeker, curved at an angle meant to extend their reach. She had spent enough time studying them to know their design wasn't just for combat. It was a statement, a declaration of dominance. Just like him. "You are restless," came Varesh's voice from behind her. She didn't startle. He had a way of appearing out of nowhere, moving like a predator who never doubted his control of the space around him. Isria turned slowly, her eyes locking onto his. "And you always seem to know where I am." He didn't deny it. "I know you better than you think." A dangerous statement, one she wasn't ready to unpack. She sighed, crossing her arms. "What happens now?" Varesh studied her for a long moment, his golden eyes unreadable. "What do you want to happen?" A question with no easy answer. She should have said freedom. She should have told him she wanted to leave, to return to the life she had before, to the rebellion that was still fighting in the shadows of Earth's ruins. But when she opened her mouth, the words didn't come. She had changed. Even if she refused to acknowledge it, something in her had shifted. "You still see me as yours," she said finally, testing the weight of the words. His expression remained calm, but something flickered in his gaze. Something deeper, something that felt like possession. "You invoked the bond," he reminded her. "I honored it. And if I refuse to be bound by it?" Varesh stepped closer. He didn't reach for her, didn't cage her in, but his presence alone was enough to make her pulse quicken. "Then I let you go," he said simply. She blinked, taken aback. "Just like that." His gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "I have never kept you here, Isria. You could have tried to escape at any moment." She had, many times. But had she truly wanted to? Her silence must have given her away because a small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Tell me," he said, his voice quieter now. "Would leaving feel like victory to you?" She swallowed, her throat tightening. She had fought for so long, carried hatred like a shield, convinced herself that resistance was the only thing that defined her. But he had forced her to see beyond that. She had seen the way he treated his own soldiers, the way he commanded not just with strength but with honor. She had learned that Zekans were not the faceless conquerors she had imagined. And worst of all, she had realized something about herself, something terrifying. She didn't just hate him anymore. She wanted him. The thought sent heat curling in her chest, an admission she had no idea how to voice. Varesh took another step, slow and deliberate, until he was close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze. His hand lifted, hovering near her cheek, but he didn't touch her. He was waiting, giving her the choice. For the first time since this began, it was hers to make. Isria took a slow breath. She could walk away. He would let her. But instead, she closed the distance. His fingers brushed against her skin, a light touch at first, almost hesitant. But the moment she leaned into it, something snapped. Varesh's lips crashed into hers, his grip tightening around her waist, pulling her flush against him. Heat flared between them, a collision of defiance and surrender. She kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring every bit of frustration, desire, and confusion into it, because she hated him, and she wanted him, and maybe, just maybe, she was finally done fighting it.